Got 5 minutes. This is great. How's everybody doing today? I saw somebody yawning. I was like, I feel the exact same way. He was like, I'm like, yeah. I could start early, which means that I could like end early, or I can let you guys talk amongst yourselves for another 5 minutes. It's all 6 of one, half a dozen of another, as they like to say in the United States. So, do you guys want to like talk? Do you want me to get started? Start.
All right.
Start. Okay.
Then let's start the conference.
Let's get this party started. Okay, so, and I want to do that. I want to have that. Okay, so I'm gonna. Here's like a kind of a funny. Okay, so we have like I have a little extra time, so I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of an aside. So, I've been talking for a long time, like speaking at conferences for a long time. I have a really weird case of jitters this morning. So hopefully you guys will be gentle with me because I don't know why, but I'm like nervous for the first time in like forever. And I've even done this talk before, so it's really strange. Okay, so I want to talk about creativity today, which is kind of an unusual topic. God, this microphone is killing me. Like, first of all, look at how big it is. Number one. Number two, it's just like I'm in a reverb, like echo chamber. Echo, echo, echo. Okay, so back to what I was talking about. So white space creativity is the name of the presentation. And so somebody was like, so are you talking about, is it about design? And I was like, not necessarily. It's kind of about designing, I guess, in a way, how you start to structure your creative process. So that's a little teaser for you. So I'm Denise Jacobs, that's my Twitter handle. You know where we are. That's the hashtag for this morning, for today, this next 2 days. And then the hashtag for the presentation is White Space Create. And there's gonna be a little bit of like irony in here, but I'm sure you guys will be okay with that. So, a little bit of background on me, if you haven't heard of me, because a lot of times people are just like, I've never heard of you, I don't even know who you are. And I'm like, I don't either. I have been in the web industry since 1997, when I was 5. And I was 5. And so I've been in the web industry for a long-ass time, as people like to say, and I wrote the CSS Detective Guide, and everything was kind of going along great until I finished writing my book, and all of a sudden I realized that what was really important to me was creativity and the creative process, and that there were a lot of other people who were really, really good at CSS and coming up with amazing things, and I would never be able to keep up with them, but this creativity thing, this is like my jam. So I have transitioned from being a front-end web developer person type to being a creativity evangelist. Woo! And I have a really cool announcement about that at the end of the presentation. So now that you have a little background about me, and that gives me, justification for being here at a web conference to talk to you, let's talk about the state of the create, as I like to think of it. Now, question for you guys, and I actually want you to respond. I know it's like 9 in the morning, but you did probably have your cafe, and you're probably a little more awake than I am. How do you feel when you're in the creative flow? What does it feel like? Somebody give me some things. Work with me here. I'm standing here in front of you, and I've got jet lag, so you guys can give me something. Thank you, Mimi, yeah. Right. So I'm going to paraphrase some of the stuff that he says. So everything flows. There's no stopping. You feel almost unstoppable in some ways, right? And then it's timeless, right? Like you're in this kind of time out of time place, right? Anybody else? Anybody else have something to add to that? That was really great, but I'm sure there's somebody else has got something else to add. Really? Come on. I know you guys are like Swiss and of other backgrounds and you don't say stuff, but I'm asking you, please, thank you.
Yeah, sometimes things are very
Mm-hmm.
unplannable.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on your mood.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on your environment.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to isolate your mind, concentrate and plan.
Okay.
And it's hard to say that something is finished.
So he's actually, in some ways, you're talking about when you're outside of the flow, right? Like sometimes the flow itself is unpredictable and unplanned and things come out of nowhere that are surprising. But then you've got those other parts where you're just like, what's happening? Why can't I get there? It's not quite moving quite the way you want. So what I like to think of is, thank you. What I like to think of when you're in the creative flow, it's almost like you're like this like magician or alchemist in a way, right? That you're taking this thing that doesn't really have any shape or any form, and you're transforming it. It's kind of coming through you and moving out into the world, and you're transforming it into this thing that somehow all of a sudden has form. Does it feel like that? Like it's this magical process? It does feel like magic, but Charles Lim, who did an amazing TED Talk, which I highly recommend that you watch, called Your Brain on Improvisation, says that creativity is magical, but it's not magic. In other words, it's not this thing that like you can't rely on. It's not this thing that's this otherworldly thing. It's this, actually in a lot of ways, I feel like it's a skill, and it's something that we can cultivate and we can develop and we can start to practice, and we can actually structure our time in a way that encourages it. The problem is, like you were saying, what's your name? John? Yeah. So like John was saying, what happens is you end up having these blocks. You end up having a blank piece of paper or a blank screen or, a blank something, a blank canvas, right? Where you're just not, it's just not coming to, you're not in that flow, you're in that blocked place. And instead of feeling unstoppable, you feel like you're just completely stuck. We have, oops, I keep hitting the wrong button. We have this amazing tool. We have our brains, right? Like we're supposedly the highest intelligence on the planet, although that's debatable at times, given what we do as humans. But we have this amazing big brain, right? And this big brain is behind all of the things that we do. And yet we don't really manage it well. And then with our brains and kind of our perceptions, we have these other tools like time and attention and focus. And we really don't manage those very well very often. And so what ends up happening is we run into these blocks. We run into these roadblocks, and they keep us from being able to let all of these really wonderful ideas in our head out into the world. And I know that all of you here are creative and have them and run into those areas. So that's that. Now, I want to talk a little bit about creativity and power. Now, because we have these big brains and because we have these tools of time, attention, and focus, we're really powerful, right? We are, in our own ways, wonder women and wonder men that can create these amazing things that nobody ever has created before. Nobody's even thought of because they are uniquely yours, right? But instead of using that power fully, instead of being able to take those ideas and take them out of this kind of bubble of your thoughts and make them actually work and come out into the world, instead of that, a lot of times we try to contain it. We try to make it a little smaller. We try to make it a little more palatable for other people, right? Kind of shut it down a little bit, make it a little more contained and controlled. Or even worse, we give the power away. Oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. I don't know. A lot of times the self-doubts are ways that we can give our power away. Little aside for you, yesterday I was talking to somebody because I don't want to try to design things anymore. I just want to go and talk to people and create things with people. And so I had I talked to somebody about doing my logo, and she's an amazing designer. She's got amazing design eyes. She's all self-taught, and we're sitting there over breakfast, and then she's just like, I don't know if I can do it. And I was like, wait, time out. I chose you. Like, if I didn't think you could do it, I wouldn't be asking you to do it. She was like, I don't know. And so we give our power away by having self-doubts like this woman did, who's an amazing designer. Of course she could do it. She could do it in her sleep with her eyes closed, with her hands tied behind her back, right? So that is kind of what happens to creativity and our power around creativity. And then we have to deal with the noise and clutter of everyday life. So instead, a lot of times, when you're in that creative flow, Mimi, for example, John, for example, do you care about anything else that's happening around you? No, you don't care. You're in it. You are like so deeply dived into it that the whole rest of the world doesn't exist. That's part of the trick, right? But it's so hard to get to that because we're always focusing outward, right? A lot of us, no names, I'm trying to get rid of it myself. A lot of us are addicted to being hyper-connected, right? On Twitter all the time. Okay, let me see if anybody's like, okay, did I get any text messages? I have this annoying habit now where if I'm driving and I get to a stoplight, I'll check my phone. Like something happened in that magical 5 minutes of time between the last light and that light. It can't possibly be that important. There's a whole big thing in the United States where they're like, don't text and drive. Like, really? And people are trying to do it too. And people have gotten into accidents and have actually died because of this hyperconnectivity. Now, I say addiction, I'm not using the word lightly, okay? There is something called intermittent reinforcement. Have you heard of this? Thank you. If you have heard of it, bear with me. If you haven't heard of this, here's how it goes. They did a study where they took rats and they put them in a cage and they gave them a little bar, and when they hit the bar, food came down the chute and they got to eat the food. Yay! And so they just kept hitting the bar. More food, more food, more food. And then they changed it so that sometimes they would hit the bar and the food would come down, and sometimes when they hit the bar, the food wouldn't. So what did they keep doing? They just kept hitting the bar, hoping that they would hit it at some point in time. Every time the food came, they got a little squirt of dopamine in their brains because they achieved their goal and they got to eat. Now, similarly, has anybody been to Las Vegas or to a casino? So, same thing. You see people sitting in front of a slot machine, trying to get that little dose of dopamine. And has anybody just checked email, just hit refresh? Like, I'm sure something has come in the last minute. I'm certain. Well, maybe I'll just check and see if are there new tweets? Maybe there's a new post on Facebook. Maybe something responded to my thing on Facebook, right? Same mechanism. When I say we're hyper addicted, every time you hear that notification, the tweet notification or the text message notification or the phone ringing, that is intermittent reinforcement. That's what's happening. Our brains are addicted to that because we actually feel like we're valued and we feel like we're important. Here's an interesting thing. Hyperconnectivity gives us the perception that we're getting more done. It makes us feel like we're doing more because we're using every free moment of every waking hour. However, it is just a perception. It actually slows us down and keeps our brains in this place where we can't actually get into that wonderful place. So these other things, we've got that, and then distractions actually on a neurological level. And again, you notice that I'm talking about what's actually happening in our brains, not oh, this is a nice idea, but also on a neurological level, when we have distractions. And has anybody seen, there's a great web blog post that came out not too long ago about programmer productivity levels. And I should have put that in there. And it has this kind of graph of you're going along, you're being productive, and then somebody comes by your desk and asks you something, and boom, your productivity plummets. And then the ideal is that it just plummets for a little bit and then you go back. But what happens is it takes you a really long time. Every time you stop what you're doing, it actually takes your brain a really long time to get back into the mode of doing that. It takes longer than it takes about 5-10 minutes, right? So every time you get a distraction, you lose time because your brain can't get back into that mode. There's something called the Zeigarnik effect, and that is that our brains are constantly, when we're doing a task, our brains are in a loop for that task. So we start the task, our brains start a loop. She's nodding her head, yeah. And then if your task gets interrupted and you start another task loop, that first loop is still running, right? Your brain is still actually running on that loop. And then you start that other task and that loop starts and then that gets truncated. And then that loop's running in the background. And then you get another loop and that one gets truncated. And that one's running in the background. And so at the end of the day, you wonder why you're tired and why you haven't gotten jack doodly squat done, right? And it's because of a phenomenon called the Zeigarnik effect. So we end up feeling overwhelmed. I think that sometimes we're afraid of actually being as creative as we really truly are. Thank you. And then we, instead of focusing and instead of getting in that zone, we're all over the place. And so in order to channel this great power of creativity, right, this power of being able to bring stuff out of the ether and into the world, the material world, what if the process was moving from thinking to creating, right? What if that process was not about what you do, but that it was about something else? So Jonathan Fields, whose work I really appreciate, said that genius is the offspring of the in-between. And so I think that it's that in-between place that we really need to focus. So let's talk about clarity. So when I was talking about our brains before, right, and how our brains are this wonderful tool. So one of the tricks is to try to maximize how our brains work well to be creative. And a lot of times when people talk about creativity, they talk about this kind of if you're a programmer and you're a developer or you're technical or whatever, then you're left brained and you're not right brained and you're not creative. Or if you're a creative person and you're an artist, then you're all over the place and you're all right brained and then you're not left brained, right? Silly, stupid. It's true that there are these different things that happen on the left side of the brain: linear processing, logical, sequential, verbal, blah, blah, blah. For the left and for the right, holistic and intuitive and, taking stuff and connecting things around and everything. And that's great. But the thing is that the creative brain is actually a brain where things are integrated, where your right brain and your left brain actually communicate well with each other. Your left brain actually kind of stacks information, I like to think of them as what's the word that I want? Like memory, inside of a supercomputer, right? And it's very kind of componentized, but then the right brain is kind of more amorphous, right? It's more like this network. And when your brain goes into a certain place, that's when your right brain can actually access all of that stuff in the left brain, take it out and put it together in different ways and come up with new ideas. How many of you guys are familiar with brainwaves? The different brainwaves? A couple of people? No? A few? Okay, so give you a little brainwave 101. So there's 5 different brain waves. I'm going to start at beta because it's my favorite place to start. So beta brain waves are when you're in kind of regular, focus, concentration. You're paying attention to something. You're working on a task. It kind of involves logic, that sort of thing. And it's also outward focus. If you're in beta brainwave for too long, it starts to actually cause anxiety and stress. Alpha brain waves is that wonderful place that you get in when you're starting to fall asleep. For example, when you're waking up in the morning, maybe when you're taking a walk or you're kind of staring off into space. Usually your body feels a little heavier, you feel kind of like warm and comfortable, and then you're just getting this kind of free flow of thoughts. That's typically alpha brainwave state. Theta brainwaves is what you go into a lot of times when you go into sleep. So deep sleep will be theta. And also, people who are experienced meditators can get into theta brainwave mode really well. And then delta is like the deepest. Has anybody had one of those nights where you felt like you had like the best night of sleep ever, and you woke up like rejuvenated, you almost felt like a new person, like you're just like, everything is just amazing. I've had a couple of nights like that. I'm always like, I want to go back. You probably spent a lot of time or the right amount of time in delta brainwave mode, and that super experienced meditators can get in that, but it's usually deep dreamless sleep. It's usually when you do a lot of healing in your sleep, etc. And then finally, the top one, gamma, is the fastest brain waves, and you can see too, just visually, like actually what the brain wave actually looks like. So it's hyper brain activities. I like to think of it like, I think one easy thing is like, if you've ever been in a situation that was like a crisis situation, for example, and you remember every detail of it. How did you remember every detail? Your brain kicked into gamma brainwave mode so that it could remember everything so it could keep you safe for the next time. Really high alertness also precedes the aha moment, and sometimes can be related to euphoria. So the magical one for us, though, is alpha. Is that relaxed one because you can get into it really easily from beta. It's a really easy drop down into beta. You guys indulge me here for a moment? Really? You guys are like, what? Okay, you're going to have to indulge me for a moment. So, if it's bright in here, I wish I could dim the lights. If you guys can close your eyes for a moment. And by the way, I can see all of you. So if you're not closing your eyes, I will be like, hey, you in the back, I can see you. So close your eyes. Get yourself in a nice, comfortable position. Okay, and I want you to just start breathing, like really relaxed breathing. Now, through your nose. Also, if you can, oh yeah. That's my boo back there. Okay, also if you can, see if you can just rest your tongue at the roof of your mouth. Just keep breathing. And if you've got stuff going on in your head, just let it go for a minute. Just keep breathing. If you can, focus on the way your breath feels going in and out of your nose. Just keep breathing. Just breathe. Just breathe. All right. Excellent. All right. You come on back into the room. You can turn the lights back up. Thank you for indulging me. Did anybody feel yourself start to relax and start your brain chatter start to tone down? So you experienced what it feels like for your brain to move from beta into alpha. Another interesting thing about alpha brainwave mode is that children, up until about the age of 5 or 6, spend most of their time in alpha brainwave mode, which is one of the reasons why children learn languages so easily, why they come up with really crazy things. How many of you have parents here, have kids? Kids come up with crazy things, right? I mean, awesome things where you're just like, how? Okay. But that's why, because they're in alpha brainwave mode all the time. Alpha brainwave mode, I forgot to mention, is associated with super learning. So it's like when people get into that mode, then they can learn a lot more and retain a lot more information. Now, just like what we did, that's one way to get in alpha brainwave mode. But there are a lot of other ways that are really easy and actually really enjoyable, like laying down. If you lay prone, your body will automatically start to go into alpha brainwave mode because it thinks it's going to probably go to sleep. Or if you're just taking a nap or you're just doing something like that, just laying down will start that process. So you can do that. Spacing out. So you know those times where you're sitting at your desk or you're sitting somewhere and then you kind of go out the window and you're just out there and then you're like, wait, what just happened? you actually went into alpha brainwave mode. You didn't know it, but you did. Or maybe you did know it if you knew this stuff already. Spacing out, same thing, daydreaming. So if you actually willingly start to think about something or imagine something or envision something, daydreaming also puts you in alpha brainwave mode. Mindless activity. I know some of you, if you guys are married in relationships, your significant other may be like, you really need to wash the dishes. And you'd be like, I don't want to wash the dishes. But just think about this. If you wash the dishes, it'll probably put you in alpha brainwave mode, or sweeping, or raking, or doing something like that. Something repetitive, cleaning out the garage. Something repetitive, which I'm sure lots of partners are going to be like, yes, I can use this later. A lot of repetitive motions will actually get you in that, and you probably have done that before and found that you were thinking about things, or you worked problems out, or something like that when that happened. Showers. A really great way of doing it. How many of you had a really good idea in the shower, right? Like pretty much everybody. And then you're just like, wait, and then by the time you get out of the shower, you get dry, it's gone. By the way, you could, there are like notepads you can get for the shower. There's like crayons that are like soap crayons that you can write on tile or something with. So if you have a lot of really good ideas in the shower, use that. Leverage that. Leverage the fact that your brain does that. And if you need those ideas, have something around so that you can capture them. Another one is something which the technical name for it is cross-channel movement, but it's as simple as this. Walking, running, swimming, anything where you're moving the two different sides of your body in different directions at the same time, that's cross-channel movement. Cross-channel movement actually helps the bioelectricity of your body and helps your brain hemispheres sync with each other so that they actually are talking to each other and you can come up with more ideas. Just like we did before, refocusing through breathing. Laughing is great. Laughing actually stimulates the right side of your brain. I have a quote for that later. And then just playing or having fun. Like I was saying, here's your quote. There's actually a guy who calls himself the laughter guru, and he invites people to him in India, and he has these laughing circles, and he actually teaches people to start laughing. And when people start laughing, even if they start laughing like a fake, like ha ha ha, he ha, and the more you do it, then you actually just start laughing. And he gets all of this stuff. He does corporate training, for Christ's sakes, but it really works. It really helps people get unblocked creatively. So instead of trying to balance all of this stuff and the distractions and the this, that, and the other thing, you can do something different. You can actually capitalize on the fact that when your brain is supposedly doing nothing, it is actually really doing a tremendous amount. So one of the ways that I am encouraging you to find that space in between, it's not necessarily doing anything per se, right? You're walking, you're taking a shower, you're laying down, you're breathing, right? It doesn't feel like you're doing anything, but it really, really helps tremendously feed your creativity and open up your creative mind. So I encourage you to intend alpha. Now, I also want to talk about a way to get into the creative zone by getting aid from the unseen. Now, here's a great quote, I think, that will kind of give a nice preface to this, that sometimes dabbling in a little bit of mysticism can be a fun way to understand and solve a problem. So let's dabble in mysticism for a little bit. Now, remember what I was saying before about kids and children being in alpha brainwave mode all the time? I want to tell you a story about a little girl that I knew whose name was Natalie. Now, Natalie, which this actually isn't a picture of Natalie, but, it's a close approximation. She was small and cute. What can you do? Natalie lived downstairs from me. I lived in this house after college. I lived in this house that had been divided up into apartments. And she and her mom, she was a single mom. They lived down in the basement. And she was about 4 years old, and she was cute as a button. And I met her once, and then she took a shine to me. And so she would come, and she would knock on my door. And I'd open the door, and she'd say, "Do you want to play?" She was so cute. And what was I going to say to her? No. I was like, sure, sure, come on in. And so playing actually meant that I was kind of babysitting her, but it's okay. I'd get a whole bunch of paper and pens and pencils and everything, and I'd set stuff out, and we'd sit and we'd draw. And one day she came to me, and she gave me a piece of paper, and she said, I drew something for you. This is also not the drawing, but it's a close approximation, close enough. And I was like, Natalie, what is it? And she said, it's a chicken cave. A what? It's a chicken cave. So it's like a cave in the shape of a chicken? No, it's a chicken cave. So it's like a cave that you put chickens in? No, it's a chicken cave. I still to this day have no idea what a chicken cave is, but to Natalie, it made total, perfect, and utter sense. I wish that I could come up with stuff like that all the time. So I say we ask for a little bit of help. We can't always do everything on our own, right? So we can get a little help from, like Natalie, who had this kind of, great, unblocked, creativity flowing so that you could create a chicken cave. Maybe we can get a little bit of help from some imaginary friends so that we can make our own chicken caves. So one of the first things that I suggest that you do, another kind of in-between thing, is to travel your internal lands. And when I say that, I mean kind of working with your subconscious. So I heard a great anecdote when I was taking a writing class about 1,000 years ago, and the instructor told us about a writer who typically, when she was like part of her process, was to get up early in the morning and to walk through her hometown in the streets of London, and just to walk and to listen to the songs that would play in her head. And she would take the songs and she would take them as indicators from her subconscious of what it wanted to work on. So whatever the lyrics were, or whatever feeling she got from the song, or whatever the song made her think of, she thought, okay, that's my subconscious communicating to me through music, which I think is kind of a really cool idea. So maybe you can try that. Another thing is to invite genius. Now, a lot of times when people think of genius, they think of somebody like Mr. Einstein, right? But he's only one form of genius. The Greeks actually had a concept of genius, and a genius was an attendant spirit that lived in the walls of an artist's house. And when an artist did their work, this spirit would come out and whisper ideas and whisper concepts and give inspiration to the artist and would help actually shape and mold the artist's work. So I like to think, well, maybe if you're having a moment where you're stuck, where you're just like, I just need my genius, and you call your genius to you and see if any new ideas or any new ways of thinking about it come to you. Or you can just ask for Dobby the house elf. You can ask for him too, although I'm not going to say a spoiler just in case you didn't see the last movies. You can also use what the Romans called a daemon. And a daemon, does anybody actually recognize this, or does this look like something to anybody? Okay. Do you guys remember The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Remember the translator, the babblefish in the ear? So this is actually a picture, one of the many pictures that I found of a babblefish, but I liked it because it looked weird. So I like to think of a daemon. A daemon was kind of, they called it like a divine something that would whisper into the artist's ear, kind of like the spokesperson, I like to think of the gods or the divine, whispering into an artist's ear to tell the artist what they're going to do. And so I like to think of a daemon as kind of a babblefish of sorts, a creativity babblefish that translates what the divine wants you to do and translates it into something that you can understand. And then also, you can think about muses. Now, a lot of times when people think about their muse, you know, they're like, I want a muse, I need my creative muse. If you think about muses, a lot of times people think about the 9 muses. Like, that's just way too many people trying to like weigh in on your creative process, right? But there were originally 3 muses. And the 3 muses were Memne or memory, melete or practice or occasion, and aoidi or voice. And so I like to think of these different muses as being able to kind of weigh in different ways at different times. The muses, by the way, were supposed to be the true speakers for whom the artist was merely a mouthpiece, right? And a lot of times when you're in the zone and you're in the flow, it doesn't actually feel like those ideas are coming from you, per se, do they? It kind of feels like, for me at least, I like to think of myself as like a channel for the idea, and I'm just the person that the idea is coming through, but it's not necessarily my idea. And muses were also supposed to inspire people to do their best. So when I like to think of this, and I think of trying to drawing on your muses, then I think of memory. And so memory as a muse can be thinking back, first of all, to all the times that you were creative and you did something that you were really happy with, or that process was really enjoyable, right? Or thinking back to things that inspired you, things that you really were just like, that was just amazing. I want to figure out how they did that, right? That can be the memory, the muse of memory. Practice or occasion is basically, in my mind, the muse of showing up every day to your creative process. In some way, shape, or form, you're going to need creativity, even if you're coding something, right? Even if you're trying to come up with some UX solution, even if you're trying to figure out like just the overall strategy for a site, for an app or something, right? You're going to need that. So I'm thinking the practice of doing it over and over and over again, kind of like the same way a martial artist goes and practices the same thing, or an athlete goes and practices the same thing over and over again. Michael Jordan was not able to make all those moves by just going out and doing it once. He did it over and over and over again. And then when you saw it, it looked like magic, right? And the same thing with you guys. You do this over and over again, and people are like, how do you do that? You're like, because I practice. So practice can be your muse. The other one is voice. And voice I like to think of as when you channel and you express your own unique voice, the thing that is uniquely yours, just in the same way that nobody in the world has your thumbprint, nobody in the world has your DNA, and nobody in the world has your same voice. That means that nobody in the world can do exactly what you do. You are a unique individual with a unique set of experiences, information, knowledge, and talent. And so the thing that comes from you is going to be completely different than something that comes from somebody else. Unless, of course, you copy, in which case it's still actually going to be different. And then finally, the thing that I like to think of is the spirit of the idea itself can inform what you do. Like I said, sometimes the ideas really aren't coming from us. They're actually coming from a different place. And ideas actually are these entities, potentially, that you can think of that want to take form. Elizabeth Gilbert, in her TED Talk, has a really great thing, actually, I read it somewhere, that she said that the world is being circled by ideas and creativity that wants to be made manifest, and they're just looking for portals to come through. And so you could be that portal that idea is like, have you ever had one of these moments, for example, where you had a really great idea? It was a great idea. And you're like, I am going to build that. And then you find out that somebody, like right when you're right about to launch it or something, you find out that somebody else built it. Yeah, anybody had that? That, I say, is an example of that idea looking for people, and you didn't pay it enough attention, and it was like, fine, I'll go over here. Shoot, I know where I'm wanted. So the other thing, too, is to make sure that you give ideas their due, right? To actually pay them attention. If it keeps coming and being persistent, then it's saying, I choose you. Just like, like I said, if you're in a significant relationship, that person chose you. You chose that person. You're making that thing happen. So I like to think that ideas use us much like an avatar. They're like using us and they're working through us until they're done in the world. And then, have you ever had that where you finally get something out in the world and afterwards you're like, wow, and I'm spent, right? So it's the same kind of thing. So the trick is, like I was saying, to really listen. Listen to the idea. Listen to everything that it wants to be. And actually, you can even converse with the idea. I used to, especially when I was first starting doing all of this stuff with creativity, and I had done a lot of research, and I was trying to develop like presentations around it, I would go for walks in the morning, and I'd be like, okay, I know that this presentation wants to happen. So I'd say, tell me what you want me to do. And I would be walking, and I'd hear, don't forget to say something about Zeigarnik effect. And I was like, okay, yeah, Zeigarnik effect, that's good. Okay. And it was like, okay, and don't forget to say so-and-so. And I was like, right, okay. And then I'd get home, and I'd write it all down. And I felt like I wasn't coming up with the ideas. The idea was telling me what to do. So when you have that and you do that, trust that the idea knows exactly what it wants. Trust is everything. And so, voila, you may get some really great stuff. So now you have a choice. You have a choice of how you can move forward. You can keep trying to push against a wall, and I need to come up with the ideas. I need to just think. I just need to think. I need to think. Like, do you guys remember Winnie the Pooh? Does anybody remember Winnie the Pooh when you go think? So you're trying to do that, and are you coming up with anything? No. I love him. He's like, no, not coming up with anything. But if you take a walk, maybe you take a shower. I talked to a guy who was like, I get so many good ideas in a shower. Sometimes I take showers 5 times a day. He was like, my wife thinks I'm crazy, but it works. And I was like, if that's what works, that's what works. So you can choose how you use your creative brain power, how you actually use this tool that we've been blessed with that is so easy to tap into with just a few techniques and a few tricks. And you can also start to recognize that the creative flow isn't in that sitting and pushing, but is actually in those in-between places, right? And that you can actually start to get to that point instead of having those doubts. Can I do it? Is it good enough? Am I good enough? Etc. That you can realize that you are, take that power back, right? And realize that you are creative and that you are matter, that you do matter, and that your work is unique, and what you come up with is probably going to be pretty darn good. So I think in order to reclaim our power, we need to tap into this different way of getting into creativity. And by doing so, we can get to this different kind of creativity, like a truer, wiser, more powerful, potentially disruptive creativity. I'm very inspired by this quote by the gentleman who wrote the book Creativity, and I have moments where I can pronounce his name, and today is not one of them. But I will tell you that creativity for me, and this is why I do the work that I do, is that when you're in that creative flow, when you're feeling creativity come through you, and you're feeling unstoppable, and you're feeling like you're in that time out of time and everything, it makes day-to-day experiences more rewarding, more enjoyable. Boredom is banished, and every moment holds the promise of new discovery. And I think that makes it all really worthwhile. So I encourage you, I actually implore you to make sure that you start to focus on leveraging the white space and leveraging the time in between in order to really generate your creativity. And that, my friends, is the end. So, a couple of things. A lot of times people are just like, that just sounds like a lot of pseudoscience to me. If you feel like it sounds like pseudoscience, know that I am a research whore, and I read a lot of articles about this. If you go to Delicious Denise Jacobs, even if you just go to Delicious Denise Jacobs and type in the hashtag creativity, you'll find loads of articles, but there's articles that I tag specifically for this presentation and other presentations like it. White space creativity, get unblocked, unfold your brain, creativity habit, brain on creativity, all of those you will find the things that I used as resources. They're always being updated, and then actually when I find new resources, I save them to Delicious, and then automatically they get sent to Twitter. And so if you follow me on Twitter, you will probably get a lot fewer posts than you think about my cats, and a lot more about great resources that will help creativity and productivity. Also, I've written several articles, one on Net Magazine, now Creative Block, couple on A List Apart about creativity, banishing your inner critic, and reigniting your creative spark. And then the latest article that I wrote is called Breaking the Perfectionism, Procrastination, Infinite Loop, which I'm sure is going to be valuable to a lot of people in this room. I wrote it for myself, by the way, so that is not a slur against you. And that's on Web Standard Sherpa, so you can go and check it out. Two more things. The art that is the colorful stuff that was behind a lot of stuff is this art piece that was drawn by this gentleman here, whose name is Americo Morales. And you can go to his website, americomorales.net, and see the stuff. He, obviously, has Down syndrome, and he is an international artist, and he travels around the world having art shows. And if that's not inspiring to you to start leveraging and harnessing your creativity and letting it flow, I don't know what is. And then, oh, great. This slide is totally jacked up, and I don't know why. Oh, it's not. Okay. If you want to find me, you can go to denisejacobs.com. It looked jacked up for a minute. It looked denisejacobs.com, denisejacobs.com, etc. And then finally, my big announcement, sorry, I'm so excited about it, is that I am on the verge of launching my creativity and innovation collective called A Creative Dose. And so I'm going to be talking about creativity, going in and doing consulting and whatnot on creativity. So if you guys have any questions about it, or any questions about anything that I've had to say, or just want to say hi, come at the end and give me your business cards and stuff. And then finally, thank you. You guys were awesome. We have time for questions. Now, the fact that none of you are asleep right now is a really good testimony to the fact that I said something halfway interesting. So does anybody have any questions for me? I'm happy to answer them. If not, you can guys go to the next thing. But if you have questions, you can ask me.
Any questions?
Yes. He looked like he was like, yes.
So when you're in the flow or getting into the flow, do you turn off all electronic distractions like phone
Absolutely.
and mail and everything?
Absolutely. And I really highly recommend that, because as soon as that you get something, like I will do things where actually I don't talk about it in this presentation, I'll talk about it in another one, but there are several applications that you can use to like block yourself from going to distracting websites like Gmail and Facebook and Twitter and Amazon and things like that. There's a Mac application that's called Focus. It's heyfocus.com is the URL, and you can put that on, and then it actually already has a list, but you can add other things to the list of distractive websites, and then when you turn on Focus, like even if you have that moment where you're like, I just want to check and see if that thing's on sale right now. No. And then if you try to go to the site, it'll actually put up this like quote, like this like aphorism, like, you know, the focused mind is the creative mind, Buddha, or something like that. So that works really well. I will turn my phone off or put it into airplane mode. So yeah, I will totally do that. Has anybody used the Pomodoro technique? Yeah? Okay, so the Pomodoro technique is something where you have a 30-minute block. You know, you work in 30-minute blocks. 25 minutes of it is a sprint, completely non-distracted. So you turn off everything, you block everything, and then you give yourself 25 minutes, you put the timer on, you work for 25 minutes. When the timer goes off at 25 minutes, you take a 5-minute break, and then you do another sprint. And so one thing that I like to do potentially for the breaks is to leverage the alpha brainwave mode. I actually lay down. Sometimes I'll lay down, or sometimes I'll get up and I'll just walk around. And then I'll go back and I'll go and do another sprint for 25 minutes. That works great too. Yeah. Any other questions?
Questions
Yes.
left?
One last one.
You were talking about people saying no to stuff, foreclosing things. How do you help them to overcome this this urge to put themselves down?
Oh, that's a whole presentation. Yes, so that is really about that kind of pernicious, evil inner entity called the inner critic. And there's a whole lot of ways the inner critic could show up. One of the things that I like to do, and kind of like I said in that particular instance, is realize that if you have that opportunity, most of the time that means that you can do it in some way, shape, or form. It either means you've got everything you need, or you're going to be able to learn something to get there, right? So I like to think of it that way. Like I had that a lot when I was writing my book, the CSS Detective Guide, and I kept thinking, somebody else should be writing this book. I shouldn't be writing this book. I don't know enough, blah, blah, blah. And every time I was just like, okay, you need to come back at another time. I need to get this chapter done. And then I would just do it. Sometimes just starting will shut it up. Like even if you're not getting it and it's kind of rough or whatever, just doing something and like starting to get into it, sometimes then you'll get lost and then your inner critic will shut up. So there's a lot of different ways. That perfectionism procrastination article is fantastic for that. And then also the banishing the inner critic article is really good for that. And you can come and talk to me and I can help you with it.
All right.
That's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
We'll have a break now. There will be plenty of time to talk to Denise also during the breaks, right?
Right.
All right. Okay, you have some time to go to the next session if you want to switch rooms or so. And the next talk is at 11 o'clock.